Merci Myriam et merci toute l'équipe de E5T. Et merci pour, for listening to me. That's the last French I'm going to speak now. I thought 3 months ago that I would have a very unhappy story to tell you about what is the energy program of the United States. Okay, right, thank you. I thought I would have a really bad story to tell you about the American energy plan. And then, out of nowhere, no one yet knows exactly how this happened, a key senator did a 180-degree turn and backed Joe Biden's plan, most of it, for the energy transition. And so, this is the result. It's the biggest green shift in US history. $369 billion has already been voted in the law over a 10-year period, but it's actually double that because there's a loan program that's about the same size. The result of this will be an irreversible shift over the next 10 years into renewable energy. The greenhouse gas reduction, because of some things that have to be cut out to get that senator's vote, won't be quite as great as had been hoped. There'd be 40% in 8 years, although with some local and state programs, it might boost up to 50%, which was Biden's original goal. Here's the reason it passed. The exact opposite of many of the advocates on this story. No carbon tax, absolutely no carbon tax. It's a law that rewards what we want, doesn't punish what we don't want. The money is a sort of Robin Hood effect. The money is coming from big companies that have ducked their taxes over the decades legally, but dishonorably, and drug companies that have been involved in the most astonishing scams that one can imagine, also legal. For example, drug companies in the US must finally negotiate with the Medicare bureaucracy, which was set up in 1965 to cover persons over 65 for medical care. They finally have to negotiate drug prices. You can imagine they've been making out like bandits for decades. There are a couple of other things in the medical story, but here's another one. Big companies have been declaring spectacular revenue. It's just spectacular revenue. Their stock goes up. But with various legal tax dodges, they ended up paying essentially no taxes. Now there will be an excise tax, it's called, on them. That'll bring in $200 billion. It should have been $300 billion, but people got to the Senate, and which is no surprise. It's one of the more corrupt institutions on the planet, and knocked out $100 billion. Then, this is a big story. That $75 billion you see there, companies buy back their own stock on the stock market. The oil companies are the world champion of this. And people looking from the outside, they don't know it's the oil companies buying their own stock. The stock goes up. So people say, oh, somebody must know something. And they jump in and buy the stock. It goes up more. Now the top management is paid on stock options. So these guys are enriching themselves by buying back their own stock. Okay, there is a 1% tax on that that's going to bring in $75 billion. That's wide open to go up next year to 2%, 3%. It's not in the law. That could probably go to 5%. That one tax may bring in another $300 billion. That's why I say there's a Robin Hood element in this story. The effect of it will be to create a massive, one of the effects, a massive electric vehicle industry in the US, because there will be something called investment tax credit. If you buy an electric car, you can get $7,500 bucks. I'll talk about that in a minute. only if the electric car is made in the U.S., principally made in the U.S., the main components are made in the U.S., and the language you see on the screen, no components or critical minerals can be extracted, processed, or recycled from, quote, a foreign entity of concern. That means China. China will not be able to dump its electric cars in the United States. They'll be able to sell them, but they won't get any of the tax credit. So I don't know who's going to buy them. The supplies will have to come from either locally or from local countries that the U.S. has a free trade agreement with. This law will provide a massive basis for a green lobby, which will be much bigger, I think, than the biggest lobby now, which is the oil lobby in the United States. It has a real stranglehold on the Congress. And it avoids the Gilets jaunes problem, because there's something for the poor. Used electric cars, you buy one, you get an immediate $4,000 tax credit. You don't have to go through any hoops to get it. You buy the car from a used car dealer, he processes the papers. So everybody who buys a used electric car will get that thing. There's $5 billion to put electric chargers scattered around the country, to some degree in rural areas. There's money for the poor persons and lower middle class housing to convert to geothermal heating and cooling and install photovoltaic installations. The $7,500 new tax credit. Let me explain what a tax credit is, first of all. You compute your taxes, and there's a bottom line. There's a number you have to pay the government. Okay, a tax credit is a dollar-for-dollar reduction in that bottom line. So $7,500 off of people's taxes. That's what that bottom line is. Okay, but there's no tax credit for high-end Teslas. But there's no cap on the number of these things. So GM, Ford, Toyota are going to sell millions of electric cars. Just millions of them. They're already building factories, throwing everything they have into doing that. They will be the biggest industrial element in the green lobby. They will be bigger than the oil companies. Big oil is be nothing. It will be, unless it converts to big wind, it's not going to be much of a story. Okay. There's more money for the poor, in quotation marks, for offshore wind, for industrial areas that are at coastal areas. If the investments use that industrial area, okay, you can get 30% of your investment back in this investment tax credit. If, that means I have 1 minute, if you pay prevailing wages and a couple of other things. If you put the thing in Rust Belt land, on Indian land, it can go up to 50% back. Now, there's something called the production tax credit. That's a tax credit for big utilities, the oil companies, if they go into this, to solar and wind. It works out, it lasts for 10 years, long enough time to amortize most investments. It works out, look at that number at the bottom, $26 a megawatt hour. $26 a megawatt hour. Let me show you the significance of that. This is from Lazar, the investment bank. Every year they put out a comparison of energy costs. I just put the little segment that dealt with photovoltaic and wind. Look at that number at the bottom. New wind installations have a cost of $26 a megawatt hour. So that means all the money that they make selling the electricity is pure profit. Utilities like EDF, EDF doesn't have any money at the moment, but the American versions of that, if they don't throw their money into renewable energy, they're run by fools. Okay, here's my conclusion. This act passed, this massive act. It may throw as much, some Princeton analysts think it might throw as much as $3.5 trillion into dollars over the next 10 years into infrastructure, energy infrastructure investments in the US. It passed because it rewards what we want rather than punishing what we don't want. It passed precisely because it's not a carbon tax. If we looked around here and I asked, raise your hand if you want new taxes, I don't think I see many hands go up. This rewards. This is what Congress is good at. Giving money away, transferring money from this guy and giving it to that guy. That's what they're good at. Okay, and the money that's transferred is basically viewed as taken from bandits and given to a good cause. If it works, and if there really is trillions that it will produce, it will transform. It will be the green transformation. It will transform what I wrote about in the green bubbles a few years ago. Everything we power, move, build, heat, or cool. Now, will it be copied by other places? I think so. Because the US, whether it should or not, maybe it shouldn't, but it does have a lot of moral power, soft power. And so I think everybody's going to pay attention to this law. Some places will copy it. And that, I think, is my 10 minutes. So thank you very much.